ABC General Hospital Spoilers reveal that, when Elizabeth Corte and Chris Van Etten confirmed that Rocco Falconeri would be responsible directly or indirectly for 2 new deaths shaking Port Charles, the revelation landed like a thunderclap. This was not a vague tease about consequences or trouble ahead. It was a deliberate signal that a teenager's desperation would spiral into irreversible tragedy. The writers made it clear 2026 would not be a gentle coming-of-age arc for Rocco. It would be a year defined by catastrophic choices, moral miscalculations, and a rescue attempt that goes terribly, irreversibly wrong. At the center of it all is Britt. Rocco's motivation is not cruelty, not ambition, not even rebellion. It is loyalty, raw, impulsive, adolescent loyalty. Britt has become a complicated figure in his world, a woman constantly pulled into dangerous games, threatened by men like Cullum, shadowed by political leverage and underworld maneuvering. When Rocco learns that Britt is once again being used as a bargaining chip, threatened, cornered, manipulated, something inside him snaps. He does not see the chessboard. He sees a person in danger, and he decides he will be the one to save her. That decision becomes the first domino. Rocco begins gathering information in secret. He eavesdrops. He intercepts fragments of conversations about Steinmauer, about leverage, about pressure tactics. He pieces together a plan with the kind of reckless confidence only youth can sustain. In his mind, he is not interfering. He is correcting an injustice. He believes that if he exposes Cullum's strategy or reroutes the trap meant for Britt, he can dismantle the threat before it fully materializes. But Port Charles is not a playground. It is a city where power players do not tolerate disruption. In attempting to outmaneuver Cullum, Rocco leaks information carelessly, prematurely. The wrong person overhears. The wrong meeting is exposed. What was meant to be a quiet exchange escalates into confrontation. And in that confrontation, violence erupts. The first death is sudden, brutal, and unintended. A figure caught in the crossfire, someone who was never supposed to be present, pays the price for Rocco's intervention. The shock reverberates immediately. Police involvement intensifies. Alliances fracture. Britt, instead of being freed from danger, becomes even more entangled. The power vacuum created by the first death destabilizes the entire situation, and yet, Rocco does not stop. Instead, he doubles down. Guilt fuels him. If he backs away now, then the first death means nothing. He convinces himself that finishing what he started is the only way to justify the chaos he unleashed. This is where the writing takes a darker turn. Corte and Van Etten frame Rocco not as a villain, but as a young man spiraling under the weight of unintended consequences. His second move is not colder, it is more frantic. He attempts a direct extraction plan, a rushed rescue, a warning delivered at the wrong time. And in the confusion, in the scramble to control a situation already on fire, a second death occurs. This one is not as accidental. It is the byproduct of escalating retaliation. Someone retaliates against interference. Someone decides an example must be made. And suddenly, Rocco's attempt to protect Britt has resulted in 2 lives lost. The city shifts. Britt is horrified, not because she doubts Rocco's heart, but because she understands the cost. Jason becomes suspicious. Sonny senses movement in the shadows. Law enforcement begins connecting threads. And at the center of it all is a boy who believed heroism was simple. What makes this storyline especially volatile is how it reframes responsibility. Rocco did not pull a trigger. He did not intend harm. But his interference destabilized a system of controlled corruption that, while toxic, was predictable. By injecting himself into it, he triggered chaos. The adjustment he thought he was making to protect Britt becomes a catastrophic recalibration of the entire power structure. And this is where the writing becomes almost cruelly poetic. Rocco's need to save Britt mirrors the way others in Port Charles justify their own morally gray actions. Protection, loyalty, family. But the difference is experience. The adults know the cost. Rocco does not. He learns it in the worst possible way. The second death is what truly shatters him. It is no longer an abstract consequence. It is personal. It is visible. It carries a name, a face, a funeral. The weight of that reality pushes him toward emotional collapse. And in that collapse lies the real mad adjustment in the storyline. Rocco begins questioning the very system he tried to play hero within. He sees how easily lives are traded, how quickly secrets become weapons, how thin the line is between savior and destroyer. For Britt, the devastation is layered. She never asked to be rescued. She never intended to become the catalyst for 2 funerals. Now she must live with the knowledge that someone died trying to shield her from a threat she understood far better than Rocco ever could. Her guilt compounds his. Corte and Van Etten's confirmation reframes the arc not as shock value, but as transformation. Two deaths are not random, they are the crucible through which Rocco is reshaped. Poor Charles will not see him the same way again. Neither will he see himself. And the most chilling part? The consequences are not over. Because in a city like Port Charles, death does not close chapters, it opens them. Retaliation, investigation, suspicion. The fallout could lead to indictments, betrayals, or even a major character's exit tied to covering up the truth. Rocco may have acted out of love, but love does not shield anyone from consequence. If anything, it magnifies it. What began as a desperate attempt to rescue Britt evolves into a narrative earthquake. 2 deaths, a fractured family, a shaken power structure, and a teenager forced to confront the fact that heroism without strategy is indistinguishable from disaster. In confirming that Rocco stands at the center of this storm, the writers have not simply promised drama, they have promised transformation through tragedy. And as Port Charles braces for the aftermath, one truth becomes unavoidable. The cost of trying to save someone in this world may be far greater than losing them. Rocco never imagined that the chain reaction he set in motion would end with 2 graves and a silence that felt heavier than any prison cell. When Britt died, the shock was already unbearable. When Jason followed, the weight became something else entirely, something suffocating, irreversible, and permanently scarring. He had wanted to save Britt. He had believed he could outmaneuver men like Sidwell and Cullum, expose their leverage games, disrupt their power plays before anyone truly got hurt. Instead, he watched the consequences unfold in blood and smoke, and now the cost had faces he could not unsee. Britt's death was the first fracture. It happened fast, too fast. A confrontation meant to pressure Sidwell's network spiraled out of control. Rocco's interference had accelerated a conflict that had been simmering beneath the surface. He had leaked information, thinking he was weakening Cullum's hold. Instead, he destabilized the balance. In that destabilization, Britt was caught in retaliation. The bullet or explosion, or violent ambush, was never meant for her specifically. It was meant as a message. A warning to anyone interfering with the structure Sidwell and Cullum were quietly building. Rocco had believed he was dismantling a trap. Instead, he lit the fuse. Jason's death was different. It carried intention. Jason stepped in when the situation escalated beyond control, attempting to contain the chaos Rocco had unleashed. He confronted Cullum directly, determined to protect both Sonny's family and whatever remained of order. But by then, Sidwell and Cullum were no longer cautious operators, they were at war. The fragile understanding between them had collapsed after Britt's death shifted alliances and suspicion. Sidwell believed Cullum had overreached. Cullum believed Sidwell was preparing to sacrifice him. Each began tightening their circles, purging liabilities. Jason became one of them. The firefight, or staged accident, or orchestrated takedown was brutal and swift. Jason died protecting someone else, as he so often did. But in Rocco's mind, the line connected directly back to him. If he had never interfered, if he had never tried to play hero, Jason would not have been there. Jason would not have stepped into that war. And then came the most devastating realization of all. In the unraveling power struggle between Sidwell and Cullum, identities shifted, secrets surfaced. Evidence emerged in fragments, documents, hidden files, intercepted calls that connected a woman Rocco barely remembered to the epicenter of the conflict. The mother who had given birth to him, whose absence had shaped his life more than her presence ever did, had been tied quietly, indirectly, to Sidwell's expanding operations. Not as a villain in the obvious sense, but as someone caught in the web of influence, forced into cooperation, manipulated into silence. When the final confrontation erupted, Sidwell's forces clashing with Cullum's remnants, she was there. Whether as leverage, liability, or collateral, the truth became merciless. Rocco's interference had accelerated the collapse of the very network that had been quietly shielding her. In the crossfire of retaliation and betrayal, she died. Not because Rocco aimed a weapon, not because he issued an order, but because he disrupted a system he did not fully understand. His actions forced Cullum to move too quickly, forced Sidwell to purge potential risks, forced exposure where secrecy once protected fragile alliances. And in that exposure, the woman who gave him life became expendable. The psychological devastation is where this storyline truly ignites. Rocco's grief is layered. Britt's death feels like a failed rescue. Jason's death feels like a fallen guardian. But his mother's death feels like a verdict. It strips away any illusion that his intentions mattered. In Port Charles, intention does not erase consequence. Sidwell and Cullum's war grows more vicious in the aftermath. Britt's death shattered one balance, Jason's death shattered another. Now, the revelation of deeper betrayals fractures the remaining alliances. Sidwell tightens his political grip, presenting himself as the stabilizing force while quietly eliminating those who could trace the escalation back to him. Cullum, cornered and furious, escalates recklessly, targeting vulnerabilities in Sonny's orbit. Each man believes he is correcting the chaos the other caused. Neither acknowledges that Rocco's initial interference destabilized the fragile equilibrium they had relied on. And Rocco stands at the center of it, drowning in guilt. He replays every choice in his mind. The moment he decided Britt needed saving, the leak he thought was clever, the confrontation he believed he could manage. He sees now how naive that confidence was. He believed exposure would weaken corruption. Instead, it removed the caution that had restrained it. When predators feel threatened, they do not retreat, they strike harder. The transformation in Rocco is profound. The boy who once thought loyalty was simple now understands its cost. His grief curdles into self-blame. He withdraws. He questions whether he deserves the protection others still offer him. Sonny watches him carefully. Dante sees the cracks forming, but no one can reach the place where Rocco has locked himself away, the place where he believes he killed 3 people without ever pulling a trigger. The most dangerous shift, however, is not in Sidwell or Cullum. It is in Rocco himself. Pain reshapes perspective. Rocco begins to understand power not as something to challenge impulsively, but as something that must be studied, infiltrated, dismantled strategically. The chaos he triggered becomes his lesson. The madness he unleashed becomes his blueprint for restraint. But restraint born from trauma is fragile. If pushed again, if threatened again, will he repeat the pattern? Or will he become something colder, more calculated? Port Charles is forever altered. Britt's absence leaves emotional fallout. Jason's absence leaves a tactical vacuum. Rocco's mother's death leaves a personal scar that cannot be healed by revenge or justice. Sidwell and Cullum continue their war, but now it carries a deeper bitterness, each side aware that the conflict escalated beyond profit into personal vendetta. And Rocco carries the heaviest burden of all, the knowledge that in trying to save someone he loved, he destabilized a city and destroyed the only remaining thread connecting him to the woman who gave him life. In this new chapter, Rocco is no longer a reckless teenager interfering in adult games. He is the reluctant architect of a tragedy that redefined Port Charles. Whether that makes him a future hero forged by fire or something far more dangerous remains the most haunting question of all. Danny and Charlotte did not hide their anger, and that fury became the harshest punishment Rocco had to endure. Grief had already hollowed him out after the deaths of Britt and Jason, but facing the raw blame in his friend's eyes made the guilt unbearable. Danny's loss was personal and devastating. Jason had always been a silent protector, someone who stepped into danger without hesitation. Now he was gone, and Danny saw a direct line between Rocco's reckless interference and Jason's final stand. When Danny spoke, his voice was tight with restrained rage. He did not need to shout. The accusation was clear. Rocco had tried to play hero in a world that devoured heroes. Charlotte's anger carried a different edge. It trembled with disappointment. She had once defended Rocco, believing his intentions were pure. Now, she looked at him as if she no longer recognized the boy she trusted. She demanded to know why he thought he could outmaneuver men like Sidwell and Cullum, why he believed loyalty alone could shield people from violence. Her voice cracked not only from anger but from betrayal. She felt he had risked everything without understanding the cost. Their reactions intensified Rocco's torment. He could survive private guilt, but public condemnation was suffocating. Every glance felt like a verdict. Every silence felt heavier than a scream. He tried to explain himself, insisting he only wanted to save Britt, that he never meant for anyone to die. But the words rang hollow even to him. Intentions did not bring Jason back. They did not erase Britt's funeral. Danny eventually confronted him in front of others, speaking about Jason's sacrifice and how unnecessary it all felt. The room went quiet. Charlotte stood nearby, her expression torn between grief and frustration. In that moment, Rocco felt smaller than he ever had. Not because they were cruel, but because he knew part of what they said was true. The anger around him became a mirror, reflecting his own self-blame. Danny's rage echoed the fury Rocco felt toward himself. Charlotte's disappointment confirmed what he feared, that he had crossed a line he could never step back over. The guilt began isolating him. He avoided their eyes. He withdrew from conversations. He stopped defending his actions. What makes this dynamic so volatile is not just the conflict, it is the pressure building inside Rocco. Danny and Charlotte believe they are expressing justified anger, but they may not see how deeply Rocco is unraveling. Grief layered with accusation can push someone toward dangerous choices. If he begins to believe he deserves punishment, that he no longer belongs among them, the next decision he makes could be driven not by heroism, but by desperation. Their anger is understandable. Their pain is real. But in confronting him so fiercely, they may be pushing Rocco closer to a breaking point. And in Port Charles, when someone breaks under that kind of weight, the fallout rarely ends quietly.